The AFC North had plenty of productive fantasy football impact players in 2020. Is that going to carry over to 2021? We're breaking it down with SI senior fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano. And Fabs, you did a great deep dive into the head coaches and the offensive coordinators and how their play calling impacts the different positions across every AFC team. For this video, we're focusing on the AFC North. So let's start off by talking about the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, Greg Roman, and how his play calling tends to impact his wide receivers.
Yeah, and not in a good way. We know Roman is a guy who runs the football, right? I mean, look at the quarterbacks that he's had. Colin Kaepernick, now Lamar Jackson, Tyrod Taylor had a good season as well. But his wide receivers have done next to nothing. Only two have finished in the top 20 in fantasy points under Roman. Anquan Bolden did it twice, and then Sammy Watkins did it once. And what did the Ravens add in the offseason? A lot of wide receivers, right? I mean, you've already got Marquise Brown. You bring in Sammy Watkins as a free agent. You draft Rashad Bateman in the first round. You draft Tylan Wallace. I mean, this is going to be an absolute mess from a fantasy football standpoint. In fact, if I could avoid every Ravens wide receiver in 2021, I would, unless I got him as a wide receiver 4 or 5, then maybe I'd take a chance. But this is a run-based offense, and that has been bad news for wide receivers.
All right, let's move over to another team in the AFC North that has had some success, especially in 2020, and that's the Cleveland Browns with Kevin Stefanski taking over. Their rushing attack was phenomenal, but the wide receivers left a lot to be desired.
And that's what concerned me when he came over when it pertained to Odell Beckham Jr. And you look at Stefanski, in his 2+ years as either an offensive coordinator or a head coach, his best wide receiver for a full season, Stephon Diggs, 2019, he averaged 14.1 points per game. Now, by comparison, Diggs averaged 20.5 points per game this past season in Buffalo. And if we dig a little deeper, Diggs is the only wide receiver to finish in the top 24 among that position in a full season. That's not good, right? It doesn't bode well for Odell Beckham Jr. It doesn't bode well for Jarvis Landry. And OBJ averages 12.4 fantasy points per game in 7 games under Stefanski last season. And a lot of those points came against my beloved Dallas Cowboys. And unless OBJ's playing Dallas every single week, well, he's a wide receiver 3, folks. And with Jarvis Landry now having to share more targets with OBJ and, of course, the trio of tight ends they have, this offense from a pass-catching perspective is going to be a bit difficult to navigate. Lean on their running backs, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. You may want to punt those wide receivers, at least in prominent roles.
Let's talk about the Bengals here, because I think they showed flashes of some potential to take a next step. A lot of injuries, right? Joe Burrow tore his ACL. Joe Mixon also was injured. What do you make of that backfield situation? Gio Bernard is gone. So what do you make of Joe Mixon now in that kind of one-man role for Cincy?
This is all Joe Mixon. I mean, Mixon is going to be the guy. You've got Samaje Perine. You've got Travion Williams. And that's about it. The Bengals really didn't do anything but add Chris Evans in the offseason to that backfield. And the Bengals have gone with a true featured back approach under Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan. I mean, Mixon has seen 33% of the touches since 2019. He's also averaged nearly 16 fantasy points in the 36 games he's played under Taylor and Callahan. That's pretty good. He also has no competition in the backfield, as I just mentioned. That's good as well. The one thing that could hold Joe Mixon back, durability. You just mentioned he missed 10 games last season with an injury, but if he stays healthy, Bill, he could end up being a pretty good 2nd or 3rd round bargain because he is going to be one of the few true featured backs in the National Football League.
Last up from the AFC North, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They started out the season on fire, but they finished ice cold. What do you make of the Steelers offense under Mike Tomlin once again, who has always led them to winning seasons, but for fantasy purposes, their running backs have typically shined when given the opportunity.
And Matt Canada's taken over as the offensive coordinator. He was the QB's coach last season for the Steelers. But under Mike Tomlin, the Steelers have had a lot of successful running backs. In fact, they've had a top 6 fantasy back in 5 of the last 7 seasons, regardless of the offensive coordinator. Now, that's good news for Najee Harris, right? Because we all love him. I think he's one of my breakout guys. I know he's one of my breakout guys for 2021. And under Tomlin's watchful eye, we've seen Le'Veon Bell rank in the top 3 among running backs 3 times. We've seen D'Angelo Williams and James Conner both finish in the top 6. And now Harris, who is a true featured back, a 3-down back at the next level with very little competition in that backfield, he could end up being a top 12 overall running back from a fantasy points perspective in 2021. In fact, Bill, I have started to see Najee Harris get drafted at the end of the first round in some of the best ball leagues. So the hype is real.
Yeah, we just showed some photos of Najee Harris in that Alabama uniform. He's among a long list of Alabama running backs that dominate in the NFL. And based on what your analysis, he's going to be among a long list of Pittsburgh Steelers running backs to help fantasy football managers win their leagues. Fabs, I know you have plenty more fantasy analysis. It's all up on Sports Illustrated. Go check it out, si.com/fantasy.